The planet was a world of soft purple skies and forests that glowed faintly in the dark. It was home to the people, a species with large eyes that could see in the faintest light. Their cities were built with open roofs and tall windows because they loved to watch the stars. And in the heart of their most sacred city, there lived a girl who had never seen any of it. Her name was Lyra, and she was 12 years old. She had been blind since the moment she was born. This was so rare that it happened only once in 10,000 births, but the priests did not call it a tragedy. They called it a blessing. They said that Lyra was touched by the void, chosen by their God to see truths that others could not. They said her darkness was sacred. So Lyra lived in the temple. She wore fine robes and ate the best food. The priests bowed when they passed her and spoke to her with great respect, but she was not allowed to leave. She was not allowed to play with other children. She was not allowed to do anything except pray and deliver prophecies that the priests wrote for her. She was honored by everyone and known by no one. On the edge of, far from the temple, there was a small human outpost. Humans had arrived on 3 years ago to study the planet and trade with They kept to themselves mostly, respecting local customs and staying out of religious matters. Among them was a man named Daniel Marsh. Daniel was 34 years old and worked as a biomedical engineer. His job was to repair medical equipment and sometimes help design new tools for alien environments. He was a quiet man who preferred machines to crowds. He had kind eyes and steady hands, and a habit of staying late in his workshop long after everyone else had gone to sleep. One evening, while Daniel was walking near the forest that separated the outpost from the city, he heard a strange sound. It was soft and hesitant, like someone trying to move without being noticed. He followed the sound and found a young girl standing among the trees. Her eyes were pale and unfocused, and she held her hands out in front of her as if feeling for obstacles. Daniel stopped walking. He did not want to frighten her. "Hello," he said gently. "Are you lost?" The girl turned toward his voice. Her head tilted slightly, the way someone does when they are trying to understand a new sound. "You are human," she said. "Your voice is different from ours, deeper, rougher." "Yes," Daniel said. "My name is Daniel. What is yours?" "Lyra," she said. "I am not supposed to be here, but I heard the machines. I wanted to know what they sounded like up close." Daniel smiled even though she could not see it. "Would you like me to describe them to you?" And so began a friendship that would change everything. Lyra came back the next evening, and the evening after that. She would slip away from the temple during the quiet hours when the priests were at their prayers. Daniel would meet her at the edge of the forest and tell her about the human world. He described machines and starships and cities made of glass and steel. He told her about Earth, with its blue oceans and white clouds and yellow sun. Lyra listened to every word like it was water, and she had been thirsty her whole life. But what struck Daniel most was not her curiosity. It was her loneliness. She spoke about the temple the way a prisoner speaks about a cell. The priests treated her with reverence, but they did not treat her like a person. They did not ask what she wanted or how she felt. They only asked her to be sacred. "What does it mean to see?" Lyra asked one night. They were sitting on a fallen log while the forest hummed with the sounds of alien insects. "The priests say that sight is a distraction from true wisdom, but I have always wondered what it is like." Daniel thought carefully before answering. "Seeing is how we understand the world around us. It tells us where things are and what they look like. Colors, shapes, movement. It is like hearing, but for light instead of sound." "Colors," Lyra repeated. "I have heard that word many times. I do not know what it means." Daniel felt something heavy settle in his chest. He had worked with adaptive technologies for years. He had helped humans who lost their sight regain it through neural interfaces. He had never tried such a thing on an alien species, but the eye structure was not so different from human eyes. The problem was not in her eyes anyway. It was in the connection between her eyes and her brain. He could fix that. He was almost certain he could fix that. But should he? When Daniel returned to the outpost that night, he found his colleague Vance waiting for him. Was the communications officer, a practical woman with short brown hair and a sharp mind. She had noticed his late-night walks and grown concerned. "You are spending a lot of time with that girl," said, "the one from the temple." "Her name is Lyra," Daniel said. "I know her name. I also know what she represents to these people. She is not just a child to them. She is a religious symbol. If you do anything to upset that balance, there will be consequences." Daniel sat down at his workbench. In front of him were scattered tools and half-finished projects. "She is lonely. She lives in a cage made of prayers and prophecies. They call her blessed, but she has never been allowed to live." Sighed, "I understand, I do, but we are guests on this world. We cannot impose our values on their culture." "What if she wants something different?" Daniel asked. "What if she wants to see?" Was silent for a long moment. "Then you would be giving her a choice that her entire society has told her she does not deserve, and that choice would have consequences far beyond just one girl." Daniel nodded slowly. He knew was right. He knew the risks, but he also knew that he could not look into Lyra's pale, sightless eyes and tell her that her darkness was a gift she should be grateful for. That night, Daniel began sketching designs. He drew diagrams of neural pathways and optical stimulators. He calculated power requirements and signal frequencies. He worked until the first light of dawn crept through his window, and by then he had the beginnings of something that might change a young girl's life forever. A visor, a simple silver band that could translate light into signals her brain could understand. A device that could let Lyra see for the first time. He did not know if he would ever give it to her. He did not know if it was the right thing to do, but he knew that he had to try. Because somewhere in that temple, a lonely girl was waiting in the dark, dreaming of a light she had never known. And Daniel Marsh could not ignore that dream. 3 weeks passed, and Daniel worked on the visor every night. He tested it on computer models first, then on synthetic tissue samples. He adjusted the frequencies and refined the neural connections until he was certain it would work safely. The device was elegant in its simplicity. A thin silver band that would rest across the forehead and send gentle pulses to the optical centers of the brain. It would not heal Lyra's eyes. Instead, it would teach her brain to see through sensors built into the band itself. During those 3 weeks, Lyra continued to visit. She came every evening without fail, slipping through the forest like a ghost. Daniel never told her what he was building. He wanted to be sure it would work before he gave her hope. But he listened to her stories, and each one made him more determined to finish. She told him about the prayers she had to recite every morning, words she did not understand and did not believe. She told him about the prophecies the priests wrote for her, vague statements about harvests and weather that could mean anything. She told him about the other children in the city, how she could hear them playing in the streets below the temple, laughing and shouting, living the life she was not allowed to have. "They say I am closer to than anyone," Lyra said one night. "They say my darkness is a window to divine truth, but I do not feel close to anything. I only feel alone." Daniel set down the tool he was holding. "Lyra, if you could see, would you want to?" She was quiet for a long time. "I do not know," she finally said. "It is hard to want something you have never known, but sometimes when people describe the sky or the forest or their own faces, I feel something inside me, a hunger, a need. I think that is what wanting feels like." "It is," Daniel said softly. The next evening, the visor was ready. Daniel held it in his hands and felt the weight of what he was about to do. This was not just a medical device. It was a challenge to everything the believed about blindness and blessing. It was a choice that could not be undone. He met Lyra at their usual spot in the forest. The purple sky was darkening, and the trees around them had begun to glow with their soft, bioluminescent light. Lyra sat on their favorite log, her pale eyes gazing at nothing. "I made something for you," Daniel said, But before I show you, I need you to understand what it is and what it means." Lyra turned toward his voice. "What is it?" "It is a device that might let you see. I do not know for certain that it will work. Your physiology is different from mine, and I had to make guesses about some things. But I believe it has a good chance of success." Lyra's breath caught. "See, you mean actually see, colors and shapes and light." "Yes, but Lyra, this is your choice. Only yours. Your people believe that your blindness is sacred. If you accept this device, you will be rejecting that belief. There may be consequences. The priests may be angry. Your life will change in ways neither of us can predict." "I understand," Lyra said. Her voice was steady, but Daniel could see her hands trembling slightly. "May I hold it?" Daniel placed the visor gently in her hands. She ran her fingers over its smooth surface, tracing the curves and edges. "It is beautiful," she said. "Even without seeing it, I can tell." "You do not have to decide now," Daniel said. "You can take time to think about it." Lyra shook her head. "I have been thinking about it my whole life. I just did not know there was anything to decide." She lifted the visor toward her forehead. "How does it work?" Daniel guided her hands, helping her position the band correctly. "Once it is in place, I will activate it. The process takes a few moments. You may feel a tingling sensation as your brain learns to interpret the signals. And then, if everything works as it should, you will see." Lyra took a deep breath. "I am ready." Daniel pressed the small activation point on the side of the visor. A soft hum filled the air, and Lyra gasped. Her whole body went rigid for a moment, and Daniel feared something had gone wrong. But then her face changed. Her expression shifted from tension to wonder to something that looked almost like pain. "Oh," she whispered, "oh." "What do you see?" Daniel asked. Lyra did not answer right away. She was looking around slowly, her head turning this way and that as if the world was too much to take in all at once. Tears began to stream down her face, but she was smiling. "Light," she said. "There is so much light, and the trees, they are glowing. I did not know they glowed. I could feel their warmth, but I never knew they were bright." She looked down at her own hands and stared at them for a long moment. "These are my hands. I have touched them 1,000 times, but I never knew what they looked like." Then she looked at Daniel. Her pale eyes met his for the first time, truly met his, and something passed between them that words could not capture. "You are Daniel," she said. "You have kind eyes. I can see kindness in them. I did not know you could see kindness." Daniel felt his own eyes growing wet. "You can see a lot of things now, Lyra. A whole universe of things." Lyra stood up and walked slowly toward the edge of the forest. She looked out at the city its towers and temples glittering in the fading light. She looked up at the purple sky where the first stars were beginning to appear. She looked at everything as if she was trying to memorize the whole world in a single moment. "I never want to go back to the dark," she said. "I know that is wrong. I know the priests will say I have rejected its gift, but this does not feel like rejection. This feels like waking up after a long, long sleep." Daniel walked to stand beside her. "What will you do now?" Lyra was quiet for a moment. Then she turned and began walking back toward the temple. "I will go home. I will show them what I can do now. Maybe they will understand. Maybe they will see that this is not a curse but a miracle." Daniel watched her go, his heart heavy with hope and fear. He wanted to believe that they would accept what had happened. He wanted to believe that Lyra's joy would be enough to change their minds. But as she disappeared into the darkness between the trees, he saw another figure watching from the shadows. A young priest named Tal stood frozen at the edge of the forest, his large eyes wide with shock. He had seen everything. He had seen Lyra looking at the world with eyes that should have been blind. And even from this distance, Daniel could see the horror spreading across his face. Turned and ran toward the temple, and Daniel knew that everything was about to change. By morning, the news had spread through every corner of. The sacred oracle, the girl touched by the void, had been corrupted by human technology. She could see. The priests called it an abomination. The common people whispered about it in the streets, unsure what to believe. High Priest stood in the great hall of the temple, his tall figure casting a long shadow across the stone floor. He was old by standards, with deep lines carved into his gray face and eyes that had seen generations come and go. He had dedicated his entire life to the faith of, and now that faith was being challenged by a single human device and a 12-year-old girl. Lyra stood before him, surrounded by a circle of senior priests. The visor had been taken from her the moment she returned to the temple. Now she stood in darkness again, but something had changed in her. She held her head higher. She spoke with a voice that did not tremble. "Remove the human corruption from your thoughts," commanded. "Renounce what you have seen. Return to the sacred darkness that has blessed you with." "I cannot renounce what I have seen," Lyra said. "I cannot pretend that light does not exist. I cannot forget the colors of the sky and the shapes of the trees and the faces of my own people." "What you experienced was not true sight," said. "It was an illusion created by human machines, a trick designed to lead you away from the path of wisdom." Lyra shook her head. "It was not a trick, it was real. For the first time in my life I understood what the world truly looks like, and it was beautiful." A murmur ran through the gathered priests. Some looked uncomfortable, others looked angry, but a few, just a few, looked thoughtful. "The doctrine is clear," said, his voice rising. "Those who are touched by the void must never seek sight. To do so is to reject the gift of, it is heresy of the highest order." "Then perhaps the doctrine is wrong," Lyra said quietly. Silence fell over the hall. No one had ever spoken those words in this sacred place. No one had ever dared. His face hardened. "You will be confined to your chambers until you repent. The human device will be destroyed, and the human who created it will face justice under sacred law." Two priests stepped forward and led Lyra away. She did not struggle or cry. She simply walked with her head held high, like someone who had finally found something worth fighting for. At the human outpost, Daniel received word of what had happened through. A formal protest had been delivered to the outpost commander, demanding that Daniel be surrendered to authorities for the crime of spiritual corruption. "This is exactly what I warned you about," said. She was packing the small common room, her face tight with worry. "They want to put you on trial. Under their law, the punishment for corrupting a holy vessel can be death." "I am not going to apologize for what I did," Daniel said. "I gave a lonely girl the chance to see the world. That is not a crime." "It is to them. Daniel, please, we can smooth this over. You can issue a formal apology, say it was a misunderstanding, promise never to interfere again. The commander is willing to negotiate if you cooperate." Daniel thought about Lyra standing in that great hall, surrounded by old men who wanted to push her back into darkness. He thought about her voice when she saw the sky for the first time, the wonder and the joy that no words could properly describe. "No," he said, "I will not take back what I gave her, and I will not let them take it from her either." Outside the outpost, a crowd had begun to gather. Traditionalists from the city, summoned by the priests, stood in silent rows with their large eyes fixed on the human buildings. They did not shout or throw things. They simply waited, their presence a quiet demand for justice. But not everyone agreed with the priests. In the lower districts of the city, where common workers lived, different conversations were happening. A middle-aged scholar named gathered her neighbors in a small meeting hall and asked questions that many had been afraid to ask. "We have always been told that the void-touched are blessed," said. "But what does that blessing look like? They live in isolation. They are never allowed to marry or have children. They spend their lives reciting words written by others. Is that truly a blessing, or is it a punishment disguised as honor?" "The priests say they see divine truths," someone argued. "The priests say many things," replied. "But this girl, this Lyra, she did not describe divine truths. She described the same world we all see, colors and shapes and light. If she was truly meant to see only divine things, would human technology have been able to give her ordinary sight? The questions spread like fire through dry grass. By the second day, the city was divided. Some called for the human to be punished and Lyra to be purified through ancient rituals. Others wondered if the ancient rituals were nothing more than traditions built on false assumptions. On the third night, a young arrived at the human outpost. He was nervous and kept looking over his shoulder as if afraid of being followed. He asked to speak with Daniel alone. "I am a servant in the temple," the young man said. "Lyra asked me to bring you a message. She said to tell you 3 words." "What words?" Daniel asked. The servant swallowed hard. "She said, I choose light." Daniel closed his eyes. 3 simple words, but they carried the weight of everything. Lyra was not going to give up. She was not going to let them push her back into the dark. She was choosing to fight, even if it meant standing alone against centuries of doctrine and the most powerful institution on her world. "Thank you," Daniel said. "Tell her I understand. Tell her she is not alone." The servant nodded and slipped away into the night. Daniel found in her quarters. "I need your help," he said. "I need to get Lyra out of that temple." Stared at him. "You are asking me to help you break into a religious sanctuary and kidnap a holy figure. Do you understand how insane that sounds?" "I am asking you to help me rescue a child who is being imprisoned for wanting to see," Daniel said. "I know the risks. I know what could happen. But I cannot stand by and do nothing while they try to erase everything she has become." Was silent for a long moment. Then she sighed and rubbed her face with her hands. "There is a ceremony in 4 days, a major religious festival. The temple security will be focused on the public areas. If we are going to do this, that would be our best chance." Daniel felt a rush of gratitude. "Thank you." "Do not thank me yet," she said. "We are probably going to start an interplanetary incident. I just hope that girl is worth it." Daniel thought about Lyra's face when she saw the stars for the first time. He thought about her voice when she said she never wanted to go back to the dark. "She is," he said. "She is worth everything." The Festival of Ascension was the holiest day in the calendar. Thousands of citizens gathered in the temple plaza to watch the priests perform ancient rituals and hear prophecies for the coming year. Every guard, every official, every eye in the city was focused on the grand ceremony, which made it the perfect time to break into the temple. Daniel had gathered a small team, came despite her reservations, her practical mind already calculating escape routes and backup plans. 2 other engineers from the outpost volunteered as well. Carl, a burly man with a background in security systems, and Molly Page, a young woman who had grown up on a colony world and knew how to move quietly through unfamiliar places. They entered the city dressed in hooded cloaks that had obtained from a sympathetic merchant. The streets were crowded with festival goers, and no one paid attention to 4 figures moving against the flow of foot traffic. "The residential wing is on the east side of the temple," whispered. "According to the servant who brought the message, Lyra's chamber is on the 3rd floor. There is a service entrance that the kitchen staff use to bring meals." They made their way through narrow alleys and side streets until they reached the temple's eastern wall. The service entrance was exactly where the servant had described, a small door half hidden behind stacks of empty crates. Carl picked the lock in less than a minute, and they slipped inside. The interior of the temple was dim and quiet. Everyone was at the ceremony. The team moved quickly up a spiraling staircase, past storage rooms and empty servant quarters, until they reached the 3rd floor. They found Lyra's chamber at the end of a long hallway. 2 guards stood at the door, their backs turned toward the corridor as they watched the festival through a window. Carl dealt with them quickly and quietly, applying pressure to nerve points that rendered them unconscious without causing permanent harm. Daniel pushed open the door and stepped inside. Lyra sat on a simple bed, her pale eyes staring at nothing. She turned toward the sound of his footsteps, and even without sight, she seemed to recognize him. "Daniel," she whispered. "I am here," he said. "I came to get you out." Before Lyra could respond, another voice spoke from the shadows. "I knew you would come." High Priest stepped forward from a corner of the room. He had been waiting there all along, hidden in the darkness like a spider in its web. Behind him, 4 armed temple guards emerged from a hidden passage. "Did you think I would not anticipate this?" said. "The servant who carried your messages reported to me from the beginning. I know everything." Daniel stepped in front of Lyra protectively. "Let her go. She has done nothing wrong. She has rejected the sacred gift of. She has spoken heresy before the council. And you, human, have corrupted one of our holiest figures." His voice was cold, but there was something else beneath the anger, something that sounded almost like fear. "I gave her a choice," Daniel said. "That is all I did. She chose for herself. She is a child. She does not know what she wants. She knows exactly what she wants. You are just afraid to hear it." His expression flickered. For a moment, the mask of righteous authority slipped, and Daniel saw the truth beneath. This was not a man motivated by faith. This was a man terrified of what would happen if that faith was proven wrong. "If she is allowed to keep her sight, everything changes," said, his voice dropping low. "Thousands of years of doctrine, generations of void-touched who lived and died believing their darkness was sacred. If one human device can undo all of that, then what was any of it for?" Daniel felt a strange sympathy for the old priest. "I understand your fear, but truth should never be feared. A faith that cannot survive questions was never really faith at all. It was just control." His face hardened again. "You will never understand our ways. Guards, take them." The guards stepped forward, but before they could reach Daniel, the door burst open. Stood in the doorway, and behind her were dozens of citizens, common workers and merchants and scholars who had followed the growing movement of doubt. "High Priest," said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had nothing left to lose. "The people of demand that the girl be allowed to speak for herself, not to the council, to the people, in the open plaza before all who wish to hear." His eyes widened. "You dare to challenge the authority of the temple." "I dare to ask questions that the temple has forbidden us to ask, and I am not alone." Through the window, Daniel could see the festival crowd shifting. Word had spread that something was happening in the temple. Hundreds of faces were turning toward the eastern wing, watching, waiting. Looked at the crowd of reformers blocking his doorway. He looked at the people gathering in the plaza below. He looked at Lyra, sitting small and quiet on her bed, and at Daniel, standing between her and the guards. "If you refuse," said, "the people will know that the temple fears a 12-year-old girl more than it loves the truth." For a long moment no one moved, then let out a slow breath. "Very well, let her speak. Let her condemn herself before the entire city. When the people hear her heresy from her own lips, they will understand why the old ways must be preserved." He turned to his guards. "Return her device. Let her see. Let everyone see what corruption looks like." A guard produced the visor from a locked chest and handed it to Lyra. She placed it on her forehead with trembling hands, and when the soft hum filled the air and her vision returned, she looked around the room as if seeing it for the first time. Her eyes found Daniel. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for not giving up." "I never would," Daniel said. "Now go show them who you really are." Lyra stood up straight, took a deep breath, and walked toward the door. The crowd of reformers parted to let her through, and as she passed, Daniel saw something remarkable. She was no longer a frightened child or a sacred symbol or a prisoner of doctrine. She was simply herself, walking toward her own future, ready to face whatever came next. And Daniel followed her, because that was what humans did. They stood beside the people they cared about, even when the whole world was watching. The grand plaza of had never held so many people. Citizens stood shoulder to shoulder, spilling out into the surrounding streets and climbing onto rooftops to see. The festival had been forgotten. Something far more important was happening now. Lyra walked to the center of the plaza, her silver visor gleaming in the light of a dozen ceremonial torches. She looked small against the backdrop of the massive temple, a child facing an institution that had stood for thousands of years. But there was no fear in her eyes, only calm determination. High Priest stood to one side, surrounded by senior priests. His face was a mask of cold composure, but Daniel could see the tension in his shoulders. The old man believed this would be the end of the heresy. He believed the people would reject Lyra's words and return to the comfort of ancient doctrine. Daniel stood at the edge of the plaza with and the others. They had done everything they could. Now it was up to Lyra. People of Lyra began. Her voice was soft at first, but it carried clearly in the silent plaza. I have been told that I am blessed. I have been told that my blindness was a gift from a sacred darkness that allowed me to see truths hidden from ordinary eyes. For 12 years I believed this. I had no reason to doubt. She paused and looked out at the crowd. Thousands of large eyes stared back at her. Then a human gave me a device that let me see, not divine truths or sacred visions, just the world. The same world all of you see every day, colors and shapes and light, the sky and the trees and the faces of the people around me. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. His expression grew darker. I was told that what I experienced was corruption. I was told that I had been led away from the path of wisdom. I was told that I must return to the darkness and forget everything I had seen. Lyra's voice grew stronger. But I cannot forget, and I do not want to. She took a step forward, and her next words were not angry or defiant. They were simply honest. My darkness was never sacred. It was just darkness. I could not see the faces of the people who spoke to me. I could not see the sky or the stars or the colors of the world. I spent every day alone in a room, reciting words I did not understand, delivering prophecies I did not believe in. I was honored by everyone and known by no one. That is not a blessing. That is a prison. The murmurs grew louder. Some people looked troubled. Others nodded slowly, as if hearing something they had always suspected but never dared to say. I do not blame the priests, Lyra continued. They believed what they were taught just as I believed what I was taught, but beliefs can be wrong, traditions can be mistaken, and when we learn that something is not true, we must have the courage to change. She turned to face directly. High Priest, I do not hate you. I do not hate the faith of, but I cannot pretend that my sight is a curse when it has shown me more beauty than I ever imagined possible. I cannot go back to the darkness and call it light. Stepped forward, his voice ringing across the plaza. You have been deceived by human technology. What you call sight is nothing but artificial stimulation, a pale imitation of true perception. The doctrine of has stood for 3,000 years. It cannot be overthrown by the confusion of one child. Then let me ask you a question, Lyra said. If truly wanted me to be blind, why did human technology work? If my darkness was divine, how could a simple machine undo it? Either is not as powerful as you claim, or my blindness was never his will in the first place. Opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. The question hung in the air, simple and devastating. Lyra turned back to the crowd. I am not asking you to abandon your faith. I am only asking you to consider whether the way we have treated the void touched is truly what intended. We are kept apart from everyone. We are never allowed to live normal lives. We are called blessed, but we are treated like sacred objects rather than people. She lifted her hand and touched the visor on her forehead. This device was made by a human, a kind man who saw a lonely girl and wanted to help her. He did not do it for profit or power. He did it because he believed I deserved a choice. And he was right. Everyone deserves a choice. The plaza was completely silent now. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. "I choose light," Lyra said. "I choose to see the world as it truly is. I choose to live as a person, not a symbol. And I choose to believe that, if he exists, would want me to be happy rather than sacred." For a long moment nothing happened. Then, somewhere in the crowd, a single voice called out, "Let her see." Another voice joined it, then another, until the plaza echoed with the sound of hundreds of people demanding the same thing. Looked at the crowd, and Daniel saw something break in the old priest's eyes. It was not defeat. It was the realization that the world he had known was changing, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. In the days that followed, the temple did not fall, but it changed. A council of reformers worked with moderate priests to the old doctrines. The new interpretation was gentler than the old, perhaps had allowed the humans to come to precisely so that the void touched could be healed. Perhaps the ancient texts had been misunderstood for generations. Perhaps faith could grow instead of crumble. 2 weeks later, Daniel received orders to return to Earth. His contract had ended, and the outpost was being handed over to a new team. He packed his few belongings and walked to the edge of the forest one last time. Lyra was waiting for him. She was no longer wearing temple robes. She was dressed in simple clothes, the kind any ordinary girl might wear, and she was smiling. "I heard you are leaving," she said. "My work here is done," Daniel said. "Yours is just beginning." Lyra looked out at the city. The sun was setting, painting the purple sky with streaks of gold and orange. "I used to imagine what the sky looked like. I thought about it every night, trying to picture something I had never seen, but my imagination was never as beautiful as the truth." Daniel smiled. "The universe is full of beautiful things, Lyra. Now you have the chance to see them for yourself." "Thank you," she said. "Not just for the visor. Thank you for believing I deserved a choice, for believing I was more than what the temple said I was." Daniel knelt down so they were at eye level. "You were always more. I just helped you see it." Lyra hugged him then, a quick, fierce embrace that said everything words could not. When she stepped back, her eyes were wet, but she was still smiling. "Goodbye, Daniel Marsh." "Goodbye, Lyra." Daniel walked to the landing pad where the shuttle was waiting. He climbed aboard and strapped himself into his seat. As the engines roared to life and the shuttle rose into the sky, he looked down at the planet below. Somewhere down there, a girl who had once been trapped in darkness was watching him leave. She was watching with eyes that could see, with a heart that had been set free, with a future that belonged to her alone. And Daniel knew, as the shuttle broke through the atmosphere and the stars surrounded him once more, that some gifts were worth any price. Lyra watched until the shuttle became a tiny point of light among the stars. Then she turned and walked back toward the city. There was so much to see, so much to learn, so much to live. And for the first time in her life, she was going to experience all of it. Not as a sacred symbol, not as a prisoner of doctrine, just as herself. A girl who chose light.